Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human. He is Mr. Arif Hassan. Arif, it's time for NDSU Hate Week. Are you ready?
Yeah, man. I've drunk the haterade. I'm all in.
You were born ready for hate. We're gonna have the player haters ball replay later, and you're just gonna go hate. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I'm excited for our 20 minutes hate.
It'll be fantastic. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Once again, thank you guys so much for listening, for helping out, for doing all the things that you guys do. Really do appreciate it. We will be going over the Eagles game, which will be happening on Sunday at noon. And we have a special guest. You know him from numerous appearances on the show. He is noted Macho Man enthusiast, Michael Kist. I will never forget from his first appearance his description of the Macho Man stuff.
Incredible story. Go back to just search Michael Kist in the archives.
Yes.
And find it.
It really is one of the finest guest appearances of any guest we've ever had. Not everybody has Macho Man Randy Savage stories. I'm just saying. But we will be previewing the Eagles game and all facets of that in just a moment, and then we'll be going to the mailbag. But before any of that, just want to thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys for helping out, sharing links on Reddit, on Twitter, on Facebook, doing whatever you guys do. Can really do appreciate it. We are still running the promotion for free swag from Norse Code. So if you are interested in receiving free swag from Norse Code, you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code, and you can donate there of $3.50 or more per month will get you into the free swag club. So we'll send you some stuff. We have plenty of random things from the last couple of years that we'd be happy to get out of my house and into yours. This includes... I am going to have to make some big special thing about the Christian Ponder Lego thing, because it is a Minnesota Vikings product that was put out on the shelves, and it's for Christian Ponder of all people. But we have a couple of random things. We got a couple of cool things to hand out, and we got some behind the scenes stuff as well that you'll be receiving. So if you are interested in such a thing, you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code, like these fine people did. We have a couple of new Patreon subscribers this week. Cal via Patreon. Again, thank you, Cal. Thank you, Landy, who has one of the better names I've ever read on any piece of internet. Michael via Patreon, who asks, who has a little bit of a note. He says, "Glad to join today and help disembowel old Nessie." I don't know if we're going to kill Nessie, but we're trying to keep her at bay anyway. Keep up the excellent analysis, and may I suggest it's slaps giving time for Dusty. Hell, let's make it an annual event. You know, I could not possibly agree more. I think this does need to become an annual event, a tradition unlike any other. And there was also a donation via PayPal from another fellow named Michael. Again, thank you guys so much. If you would like to just give a one-time donation, if you hear value in what we present, you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code, or you can go to paypal.me/Norse Code as well. Again, all these things help keep the lights on, help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay, help keep the show ad-free, and it also helps with things like the live show, which will be happening on November 29th. We will be taping a live special edition of Norse Code from Pedosky's in Seattle. I've been following their Facebook page, and they've been doing all the Midwest sports stuff this over the past couple of weeks. So like all the Twins, sadly, all the Twins losses were played at the bar, and the bar opened early for them. So, but they've been doing all sorts of Midwest stuff. So check them out. All sorts of Midwestern fare is apparent and available for reasonable prices over at Pedosky's. So we'll be heading over there on November 29th. Time is not yet determined yet, but check us out over there. So, all of this aside, we're going to be going into the Eagles preview with noted Macho Man enthusiast Michael Kist. Arif, take us away.
All right, and I got Michael Kist here from Bleeding Green Nation, fantastic writer and my mortal nemesis. How you doing?
Did you hit record? Because sometimes when I do these, people don't hit record, and then we have to do them all over again. So I just want to make sure that you hit record.
Yeah, hit record, buddy.
Okay. I'm doing good.
Yeah.
How about you?
I was doing better, 3 seconds ago.
Oh, wow. You put this on yourself.
Let's talk about the Eagles. So Eagles defense, kind of weird. They rank, 13th, 11th, 12th, bunch of metrics, third down defense, points scored, points per drive, etc. But you take out the Jets game, especially in terms of passing statistics, you take out the Jets game, and they drop from somewhere around 11th in adjusted net yards per attempt all the way down to the mid-20s. And so it really feels like, especially beginning 10 sacks the Jets game, 3 sacks the rest of the year, it really feels like the Eagles defense, the averages aren't really going to tell us much. At the same time, a couple of players coming back from injury. I think Sidney Jones might be the most notable, and that'll probably change things a lot. So I don't even know how much that history is going to matter. What are your impressions about this Eagles defense? It doesn't really feel like, the Eagles defense of 2018 or 2017.
Yeah, it's a totally different ball game, and it is interesting. Like you said, you take out the Jets game, and I think the same happens with DVOA as well, because they're the 6th-ranked DVOA defense.
Yeah, they're like 22nd. Yeah.
Right, yeah, from 22nd to 6th in one game. And it was crazy because the entire season we haven't, the Eagles defense hasn't been getting sacks. And then you turn around and you become the first team ever to have 10 sacks, an interception return for a touchdown, and a fumble return for a touchdown. And it turns the entire metric around. So, yeah, you're right. You're not going to get much from averages from this team. But I think if you watch them and you throw the Jets game out, you do see a unit that is struggling a bit, and especially with injuries at the cornerback position. They've got one good corner that we definitely know has been solid and on a consistent streak, and not with the up and down waves with the defense as a whole, and that's Rasul Douglas. And Rasul Douglas doesn't exactly match up fantastically well with a guy like Adam Thielen or with a guy like Stephon Diggs. He's a longer corner, press corner, can't turn as well. Schwartz plays him off, which is not really his game, which is weird. So there's that whole thing. Sidney Jones coming back is good when he's playing well. That means he's healthy. When he's not healthy, he plays pretty terribly. And I get a lot of crap about it because I was big on the Sidney Jones bandwagon coming into the season because he had a fantastic camp. The guy just can't stay healthy, and it tends to happen. He tends to get injured when he has to run really fast in a straight line and gets burned by Devontae Adams. So it's all weird. They're having issues with their play action pass defense. Before the Jets game, they were giving up like a quarterback rating of like 133. And I know the Vikings use it the 7th most in the league, or at least that's, per quarterback. So that's an issue for them. The linebackers get sucked up. They're so great in run defense because they're stuffing guys in the box and they're reacting really hard to these run fakes. So they're having issues overlapping zones and not giving up huge swaths of space and getting the flat defender out there while their cornerback bails into a deep zone. So there's space all over the field. It's a weird defense that I haven't quite figured out yet. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle with them as far as the pass rush goes. I still don't know about the rest.
Yeah, the Jets game is so fascinating just because. So this game, I saw, Luke Falk pressured on 65% of his dropbacks. Also, Sport Radar says that the Eagles of all teams, blitzed on more than 50%.
Yeah.
Of Luke Falk's dropbacks. I check if I exclude the Jets game again. So this isn't even in terms of results. This is in terms of process too. They changed their process against Luke Falk, which fair enough. But they blitz at a rate of 16% in the other 4 games combined, which matches the rate of 16% last year, which was the lowest in the league, even lower, than the blitz-averse Lions. So. Yeah. Does this feel like Jim Schwartz kind of known for wanting to rush with his front 4. Does it feel like going into kind of a more standard game against a quarterback that isn't the 3rd string player on the roster, that they'll kind of go back to rushing that front 4 and kind of letting aside from maybe some third downs, kind of letting the coverage defenders cover.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. And you mentioned, the selection as far as where he wants to do it. He wants to do it from like 40 to 40, and he wants to do it on third down. And I think there were some second down ones earlier in the year, but mostly third down, 40 to 40, he wants to knock you out. I think that's the way it was against the Falcons. You saw a lot of cover zero. Above 50% for Schwartz is like mind-blowing. But the high amount of blitzes that he sent at Falk is not going to be normal. I think he was experimenting a lot because he uses that cover zero blitz a good deal, but they've been getting burned on that a little bit. And then when that happens, and it happened last year, you'll see him start to mix it up. I saw so many corner blitzes, outside corner blitzes and nickel corner blitzes with like defensive linemen dropping into zones against the Jets. I've never seen that from Schwartz before. I saw safety blitzes from Rodney McLeod. He was doing all types of new stuff that he never does. I think he understands with the Vikings that they are going to use a decent amount of play action. They're going to use a screen game and whatnot. And with play action also comes max protect. I don't think he wants to smash into a wave of max protect with some shaky defensive secondary play, sitting behind that. I don't think he cared about it with Falk because he knew he can deliver it. But I think Cousins is a different story, and the different game plan that they have, I think that's going to be more of the 16 to 20% that you see from Schwartz. I think the real only exception outside of that Falk game was last year against the Rams. He blitzed Jared Goff a lot, but Jared Goff is a little pansy that can't handle pressure, and when he knows that a blitz is coming, his he starts flying sparks everywhere. So yeah, I don't expect a heavy blitz game from Schwartz. I think he's going to give a little bit more respect to Kirk Cousins.
Sure. So why has the secondary been struggling? Because so you mentioned, Sidney Jones having an injury. You like Rasul Douglas's play, but it feels like there's more at play here. I mean, everyone knows Malcolm Jenkins is a really high level safety, so that's probably not it. Is it just injuries, or is there something else as to why that secondary is struggling?
Yeah, it's just been the second cornerback spot. I think everyone is freaking out about it. I think there's been like an over panic about it. I think people are a little too worried about it. But like when you play Craig James in there, I think people get, freaked out a little bit. Orlando Scandrick was brought in to be the nickel because, Avonte Maddox was also knocked out during the Green Bay game as well. And I think that's when the panic really started. Because you lost both Sidney and you lost Darby the week before, and then you lose Maddox right after that. And you start to get like that 2018 feel where they had, I think, the 31st worst amount of injuries or games missed, according to Football Outsiders, from the defensive secondary. So there's been a wave of them, but they are getting guys back, which is good. They're not going to get Darby back for this. They're not going to get Maddox back for that, but getting Jones back and then having Scandrick in there, I'm not too worried about it. It was just a quick rash of injuries, and I hope that's all it is. But other than that, I mean, Rodney McLeod, I think he's starting to come into his own again, but he was coming off an injury and he was a little bit rusty to start. Andrew Sendejo has been okay, but he has had some high leverage busts that really stood out to people. The missed tackle in week 1 against Vernon Davis.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, getting burned by Jimmy Grant in man coverage, where he just kind of lost his bearings at the snap and took a step forward when he should have been, in phase with the receiver. So a lot of high leverage plays that he's lost that I think has reduced the confidence in the secondary. But overall, I think they can be okay.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the linebackers a little bit. So, from my understanding, the snap counts have gone primarily to Nigel Bradham and Zach Brown band. What do you see from these linebackers? Are they primarily just kind of run stoppers, or can they perform in coverage when they're not getting sucked up in play action?
Yeah, it's weird. Bradham in 2017 performed like one of the top 5 pass coverage linebackers in the league for my money. And then 2018, he started out rusty, and 2019, it's a bit of the same deal with him. So he's missed a lot of tackles too. He's not up to form with what he was in 2017, and he had a shaky year last year. I thought he was great in the Bears game in the playoffs, and then in the Saints game he really struggled. We're seeing more of the Saints game from him over the life of 2019. Zach Brown is okay. I don't think he's anything special. He's just a decent dude. I think both of them struggle in coverage, especially compared to what their metrics showed us coming into the season. And Nate Gary has been getting a lot of time, and I understand he had the pick 6 that was forced by Brandon Graham and underthrown by Luke Falk, which is all great. He was beaten on that. It should have been a first down if any other quarterback's throwing it. He also picked off Matt Ryan, who has oatmeal for brains sometimes. So I he did was stand there. I don't necessarily put that on Gary, but other than that, I think he's been a big problem in the separation that they're giving in space against play action coverages. Because, I mean, there are times, if you watch the film, Arif, if you watch play action with Nate Gary, there are times where you're going to see him shoot 3 steps forward later than everyone else and then completely turn around. And sometimes he doesn't even know which zone he's trying to get into. So he's a bit of a space cadet, but getting Camus Grugier-Hill back, I think he's the guy that they want as their coverage linebacker. He's a converted safety like Gary is, but he's actually got some brains to him and knows how to use his athleticism. So we might see more Camus this game.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about the front of it then, the defensive line. Brandon Graham, obviously the premier edge rusher there. Derek Barnett, first-round pick. Graham, the story of his career, obviously, is that he's gotten a ton of pressures, not a ton of sacks. Cleaned some of that up against the Jets. Got 3 sacks, I think, in that game. But, he's been a really kind of phenomenal player that until very recently hasn't really had a chance to start and to premiere for the Eagles. What's the impact he's had? Is Fletcher Cox playing as well as he did the past couple of years? It feels like I haven't heard his name as much in terms of national coverage. What's going on with that defensive line?
Yeah, Fletcher Cox definitely hasn't been on the same level. I think he was coming in with a bit of a knock on his foot. He showed up on some injury reports early on in the season. I think he turned it up a little bit against the Jets, so that's a positive step in the right direction for him, because when he's on top of his game, this defense really goes, because especially with the losses of Timmy Jernigan and Malik Jackson, they're being replaced by guys like Hassan Ridgeway, who's been fine, but like they're not going to give that like dynamic pass rush that those two could. At not having that interior rush has been bad for this defense, and I think that's why they weren't able to convert a lot of those pressures into sacks, because they also weren't getting the interior pressure along with the pressure on the outside. Teams were getting the ball fast out too. But yeah, I think Cox will get back to full strength. I think he's about there. And then, you look at Graham, that guy's always going to struggle to convert pressures into sacks. And I know he had 3 against Falk, but Luke Falk was holding on the ball, a good deal there. Mm-hmm. And the offensive line is booty cheeks. I don't know if the Vikings line is all that great, but at least on the outside, they're a little bit better. So that's that. They schemed him up too. I mean, they did some stuff with Graham where they would have Cox on the nose and then 2 guys left of him. So you couldn't, you knew you were going to get the guard Winter against Graham, and one-on-one, he's going to beat him like a drum all day. And then, the added pressure of throwing all the blitzes in there helps him clean some stuff up. But Graham is who he is. He's going to make a splash play in the backfield in the run game, and he's going to create some pressures, but that's just kind of what he is. Derek Barnett, still don't know if he's worth the 14th overall pick, and the jury is very much out on him. He's starting to develop some inside counters, so that's nice. The depth for the Eagles, Josh Sweat is looking okay. Looked like he might come on. Vinny Curry, until this Jets game, wasn't doing anything. I honestly couldn't remember the last time his name was called before that. So there's some issues with the pass rush that I believe the sack issues coming into the Jets, I think there's still a little bit there for him, but I think a healthy Cox solves a bit of that.
So in terms of, because it is, I think, the story of this defense is it's difficult to get a handle on it. So going into this game, so Cousins has overperformed against bad defenses. He's beaten bad defenses better than elite quarterbacks tend to, at least statistically. And then against good defenses, he's underperformed. He's played basically like Josh Allen, but without legs against good defenses, right? And so he's underperformed against good defenses to like this shocking degree. And here I'm going into this game and I have no idea what to expect. I don't think the Eagles defense is good, but I don't think they're bad either. And, we haven't had an average defense for the Vikings this year. And so is it fair to say that they're this year maybe performing like an average, or expect them to perform like an average defense? Should I expect them to perform kind of above that level? Because, you've got Fletcher Cox returning to maybe his full form. You've got, Sidney Jones returning and healthy. You've got maybe Camus Grugier-Hill. Like what's the level of expectation? Where would you put this defense, going into this game if you were to rank it, I guess, essentially against a bunch of other teams?
What's so funny is that we're actually calling this game the Kirk Cousins litmus test game. to find out what our defense actually is, because we
perfect.
don't know. Yeah, we have no clue. We are going to base a lot of our opinions about this defense and what they're going to look like with all of these marks out there, because we think they can be an above average defense. Not great, but like they'll keep you in games and they won't lose them for you as long as the offense is scoring points, and the offense has. But yeah, I mean, we're going to base a lot of these opinions because you're worried about the play action game. The Eagles have been buns against the screen game. The Vikings have been a top 2 screen offense this year in the NFL, so that's a problem. And you've got the matchups with Thielen, Diggs, and then if Mike Zimmer ever smells the coffee on Irv Smith and gives him the snaps that he's given Kyle Rudolph, that's a matchup problem right there too. So there are a lot of different pieces out there that can give the Eagles issues, and if they handle them well against Kirk Cousins, then I guess they're a good defense. Or like I don't know, if Cousins plays average, then they're an average defense. It really is the Kirk Cousins litmus test.
That's totally fair. Well, let's talk about the other side of the ball. A little bit more interesting. We'll talk about skill players. We'll talk about the fact that the 6th best quarterback on the roster is starting. And this purportedly good offensive line that doesn't feel like it's as good as it has been in years past, but still pretty good. What do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line, I think there were some pass pro issues that, I mean, not so much. I think it was more in the run game. They were having issues creating movement. I think at one point they were ranked like 24th in adjusted line yards by Football Outsiders, and that kind of matched the film. They weren't creating a lot of lanes. We didn't see that really come out until, once a game, like in the third quarter, they'll come out with like 12 personnel and 6 offensive linemen, and they'll just kick your teeth in for a long drive. It came early against Green Bay, and then they did it later as well. But I think they're starting to open up holes. They're starting to work together. Brandon Brooks came back from his injury, has just been absolutely fantastic. He's been the best offensive lineman.
Yeah, I was about to say, he looks like he's been the best offensive lineman this year.
Which is crazy considering his Achilles in the divisional round against the Saints. So he said that he was coming back week 1, and he did, and the Eagles put him on a pitch count, but only to make sure that he was, ready to come back and all that stuff. It wasn't because he was hurt, but like we laughed when we heard that Brooks said he was going to be back like so quickly, and he's out here dominating. Like it's wild. So he's fantastic. Kelsey's been awesome. I know Brandon Thorne thinks very highly of him, thinks he's the best center in the game. Jason Peters has really started to come on the last few weeks. Lane Johnson's Lane Johnson. And outside of the game against the Falcons, where Isaac Seumalo just got beat like a drum and became public enemy number 1 in Philadelphia, that rhymed. I did not mean to do that. But he has been basically just a replacement level starter, which is all we need him to be on that line. So I think the line has come together over the weeks and performed better than they were earlier on in the season.
So knowing that, Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, who have either taken some time to kind of get into form again, or maybe not who they've historically been, or maybe they are who they are right now, knowing that they'll go up against, Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin, both of whom are in the top 10 leaderboards in terms of pressure created this year. What are your feelings on that kind of matchup? Is it like a great matchup? Is it, a little bit worrisome given kind of the track record of the offensive line this year? Or what's the feeling?
I think Jason Peters, and he had a pretty good duel with Preston Smith, and Preston had a couple of wins on the inside with some really nice inside moves. I think the inside moves of Everson Griffin are going to give Peters more problems than Preston Smith did. Everson Griffin has been absolutely lights out this year. He's playing freaking fantastic, and I've been watching him throughout the season. So I think he could give Peters some problems, especially with the quickness of his inside moves. Unless Griffin is lined up over Lane Johnson. Like Lane is weird. Lane has a super deep, like vertical set, like to the point where a lot of the times the player can like reach out and knock the ball out. It happened against the Vikings last year. So I think Everson would give him issues there. I don't necessarily know if Danielle Hunter, I think he's more of a speed rusher, right? Am I feeling that right?
Yeah, his power comes from speed, so he's a speed rusher. I mean, he'll play with power, but it's a speed to power transition.
Yeah. So I think Lane's going to do fine there. I'm definitely mostly worried about Peters and Everson Griffin.
Sure, fair enough. Well, then let's talk about the tight ends. So the Eagles lead the league in 12 personnel, but they also, to my understanding, only have 2 tight ends. What's going on?
I mean, that's what happened in the Falcons game. They coming into the week, it was like, okay, we're only going to dress 2 tight ends. And everyone was like, why would you do that? You run so much 12. And they were like, oh, well, if we'll need to, we'll throw in Andre Dillard. Like, Andre Dillard doesn't catch passes. That's 6 offensive linemen. That's not 12 personnel. That's just another fat dude in there. So they come into the Falcons game, And Dallas Goedert, who had been dealing, I guess, with this calf strain throughout the preseason, which, by the way, if he was dealing with a calf strain throughout the preseason, why would you even why wouldn't you activate Alex Ellis? I don't understand. It was stupid, and they ended up having to throw away half their playbook. And a lot of their offensive struggles can really be, it was one half against the Atlanta Falcons where they just looked absolutely terrible, but it was under very weird circumstances. So, yeah, they only have two. I don't know if they're really going to try to fix that with maybe a veteran or something like that. They had Richard Rodgers, there's Josh Perkins and whatnot. There were some injuries going on there, but it's super weird to me. But really, when 12 is on the field, and I think Goddard's back healthy, when it's Goddard and Ertz, the run game really gets going. You saw it against the Packers. The Packers wanted to match 12 personnel with like 5 or 6 defensive backs a lot of the time, which was stupid, and they got ran all over. And then also in the passing game, Dallas Goedert versus Will Redmond is like an auto throw. So there was that issue that Green Bay had with it as well. So they're very good pass catchers too. They want to work under center. They want to work their play action game off of that. I think you saw what the offense can turn into if they're not working 12. They don't have both those guys out there. It was a very 11 personnel heavy game without play action. It was all shotgun. I think they're a much more diverse team from the run game and the pass game out of 12 personnel, and I think that's where they're most dangerous.
So is it kind of like so obviously Goddard and Ertz aren't the same as Gronkowski and Hernandez on the field and hopefully off the field. I can't speak to Goddard's character.
I mean, we don't know, right? This is our blind spot as draft evaluators and pro evaluators, right?
Right. Is it a lot like, what the Patriots were doing in 2010 where, you come out in 2 tight ends and if they're if they've got coverage friendly personnel, you run the ball. Do they check at the line based off of what they see, box count, personnel, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the next-gen stats of any Philadelphia running back over the past few years, and you're going to probably see them under 10% for 8+ man boxes, the runs into 8+ man boxes. They box count. They use a lot of RPOs. Past couple of years, they've been a top 3 frequency RPO type team. And I think that's a lot of the issues. Like a lot of the fans say, they don't stick with the run. They only ran 4 times in the second half. Well, a lot of them are RPOs, and they weren't given the looks for runs, so they went and passed it. So yeah, they will spread you out. They'll line up Ertz pretty much everywhere. They like to do the trip set with Ertz on the backside and get them 1-on-1, and they'll do a lot of different things.
Y ISO, yeah,
Y ISO. They'll do YY wing, under center, and they'll run it that way. They'll run their wham concept out of that with Goddard coming across the formation to smack a defensive tackle. So they do a lot of different things, both in the passing and the running game with them. So yeah, I would say there's a lot of variety there. They definitely box count, and they'll go with what they think the matchups are best, not only from a run pass perspective, but from, who are we targeting? Which side of the formation are we looking at? Where are the reads coming from the passing game?
We'll talk about the receivers in a second because they have been due to, especially with Deshaun Jackson, continue to be injured.
Yeah.
But why hasn't Dallas Goedert been getting that many targets?
He had the calf strain that kept him out of the Atlanta game, and then what was it, the Lions game? He was on a pitch count. I think it was like very few snaps, and he actually dropped a touchdown in that game. So obviously hurt, because I know his calves are connected to his hands, and that's what happened there.
Yeah, that's science.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, you got the Jets game, and the game script called for a bunch of running. So really there's only been like 1 or 2 opportunities for Goddard to get some production. I think he's a guy that they want to feature. He had a touchdown in the Packers game. So I think it's much to do about nothing, and he's contributed a lot in the run game when he's been healthy.
All right, and then let's talk about these receivers. So Deshaun Jackson hurt, J-Ja, my son, disappointing, I think.
Yeah.
Mac Hollins, my other son, hasn't seen the field, I think. So you've got Alshon Jeffrey, who's got this like funny reputation as a Vikings killer, and Nelson Aguilar, who's still riding off of the 1 year he was a good slot receiver. What's the deal, man?
It's weird, man. I was a big J-Jaw fan too, and I think I knew there was going to be some development there, but I also didn't expect the Eagles to need him right away. And Jeffrey, was banged up. He looked a little slow in the Packers game, and Kevin King had a good game against him. But I mean, you look at these drop rates for the Eagles. The J-Jaw is
Carson Wentz leads the league in drop rate, by the way, from his targets.
Yeah, and he has the most big time throws for drops as well. There are 5 deep passes that got dropped for the Eagles, so they're impacting his stat line. Like big time. Like J-Jaw, he dropped the one against the Lions at the very end, hit him right in the hands. Defender didn't even touch it. So his drop rate's 33% because he's only got 3 catchable targets because the guy hasn't gotten open. Sproles' drop rate's 29%. Goddard's drop rate's 29%. Howard's 25%. Hollins is 17%. Deshaun's is 11. Aguilar's is 10. And Aguilar has fumbled the ball twice.
Aguilar's drop rate is one of the lowest on the time.
And he gets the most crap. And I mean, he has the fumbles to go along with it too. But like, he's the one like everyone's pointing at because of that. At the end of that Falcons game, he was like nothing but green pasture ahead of him, and he dropped one right in his hands. He said he lost it in the lights, which is like nonsense. The Eagles must play in like the brightest stadiums in the freaking world when they're on the road. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, though, like Hollins has been okay for what he is. We're not expecting him to be like a doorbuster or anything like that. So he's been all right in that area. The chemistry between Wentz and J-Jaw is just not there yet. And that's part of the problem, too, along with the separation that J-Jaw's not getting and the high leverage drop at the end of the game. But, yeah, it's been bad. And like I said, Alshon was a little slow against Green Bay. I think he's starting to come on. So I think this may be the game that he comes on. Him and Xavier Rhodes. So I think Xavier Rhodes has struggled a little bit this year. Him and Xavier Rhodes have always had good matchups. Even when Rhodes was at the top of his game, Alshon always gave him fit. So that might be something to watch.
Yeah, that I think is going to be kind of maybe the narrative creator matchup. I think we're going to learn a lot about both of those players for how they're going to play for the rest of the season in that matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about the running backs for a second. So you've got Saquon Barkley's backup. You've got David Montgomery's reject. And then you've got a 40-year-old with like a 29% drop rate. What's that?
Yeah.
And then the good Wisconsin guy.
Right. And the good Wisconsin guy and the 40-year-old are banged up. And I'm not even sure they're going to play. Like they might have to reach into the practice squad for a third running back. You said Saquon Barkley's backup. Like I have starting to build a reputation with the Philly fan base for being a Miles Sanders hater. And I don't hate him. I just hated the draft pick. So, and he's not been living up to being a second round pick. So I don't know what you want me to tell me. The guy's vision is bad. His footwork is terrible and inefficient. And you can tell the hamster wheel is turning like really hard. And the guy ran for 9 carries, 15 yards last week. And it was right after I wrote an article about him saying like, he's not living up to expectations after his best game as a pro. And I got a bunch of crap for that. And he stunk afterwards. Like his best contribution has been in the passing game. Right. It's absolutely my fault. But like the guy, people in Philly are weird because they see him work in space in training camp. I knew you. Yeah. I want to roll right past that. You see him in space at training camp. You see him in more space in preseason and you go, wow, this guy's got like a pretty good burst. Well, in Philly, it's like no other running back in the world possesses his burst. Like it's just an above average burst. And if that's his only redeeming quality as a running back, if your vision sucks, if your finishing sucks, if your broken tackle rate, which is like in the bottom of the league per Sports Info Solutions, sucks too, you might suck. And that's kind of, people are starting to come around to that realization with Miles Sanders. It's just not.
I don't hate him. Runner. I just think that he might suck. That's the take?
Yeah, that's the take. I mean, he's an inexperienced runner. He's got room to improve. I knew that was going to be, what it was coming into the league. Jury is not out, but right now he sucks. Jordan Howard is mostly pedestrian and doesn't make a whole lot of guys miss either, but he makes the right reads and he falls forward a lot and he's a good pass protector. So he's basically like the high end of what I thought they were getting when they got him. And he's solid enough and he's given the Vikings some problems over the years. So if I were to say who's going to get the most touches and who you'd have to be most worried about, it'd be Howard. And then maybe a mesh sit wheel concept to Miles Sanders that'll go for 40 yards and I'll have people in my mentions all week, even though it's worked with literally every single running back that the Eagles have carried over the past 3 years, or actually since the Chip Kelly era. So, yeah, that's my feelings on the backfield.
Yeah, no need to sound bitter. Now, let's talk about quarterbacks.
Look, that's what happens when you overspend on his second-round running back. He doesn't produce. All running backs come into the league and produce from every sort of round. Like, what? I don't know why people are being so patient with the guy. It's running back. You can get him anywhere.
Just find one.
You can get him literally anywhere. You can go to. He's like, you could have gotten him from the Aldi. Instead, you went to the mall to buy him. Like, the prices are going to be higher. Anyway.
All right. Quarterbacks currently on the roster better than Carson Wentz: Josh McCown, Nate Sudfeld, Kyle Lauletta. Lane Johnson and Greg Ward.
I totally forgot Lauletta. Okay, yeah, that's right. He's on the roster.
He's on the practice squad, man.
Because he's better than Clayton Thorson. I hated that pick too. Maybe sometimes I'm right about these things.
Sometimes. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, if he's the scout team quarterback, I mean, if you're Carson Wentz, you see Kyle Lauletta over your shoulder.
Down
That's
your neck.
Yeah.
I'll play along.
No. Okay, so let's talk about Carson Wentz a little earnestly. Not too earnestly. I mean, it's my podcast after all.
Yeah. You're gonna give him the Philly media treatment. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I got a good one this offseason after that tier list. Even got on to Philly radio. Okay, so let's talk. So Carson Wentz has bamboozled the graders at PFF. He is, I think, their top ranked, and if not their top, their second ranked quarterback. But as we already mentioned, he was like 15th or something in adjusted net yards per attempt. A lot of that has to do with leading the league in drop rate. It feels like that can't be it though, because drop rate, its impact on statistics is significant, but the difference between first and 15th is really, really dramatic.
Yeah.
And drop rate probably doesn't account for all of that. So what else is there that gives him good grades by graders, but doesn't show up statistically?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with some chemistry issues with J-Jaw. Maybe PFF is grading J-Jaw negatively for not giving Carson eyes when he needs them, or Matt Collins running a route a little bit weird. Miles Sanders doing the same thing on a different one that wasn't a drop, but like you could tell there's an obvious miscommunication. There's a lot of things going on there. I think his accuracy has been like not as good as it was last year. I think there's a bit of a drop off there. I think it's just been like solid to decent. So I think that's led to some of the issues along with the drops, the 60% completion percentage that everyone is freaking out about, which was his completion percentage in 2017, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
I mean, there were some issues there, and he early in games, I can remember the Green Bay game. He was high on a couple early ones. He tends to come in a little jacked up. He's almost like you remember Donovan McNabb would come into games in the first quarter and he would have to get a few worm burners out of his system before he would be okay.
Well, with the Vikings, it was more than a few, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean that was at the end of his career, so he was washed by then. But I mean, I'm not a big Donovan fan anyway. Don't let the Eagles
Hall of Fame. Let's go.
Oh God, no.
Still lives in Minnesota, by the way.
Please no. Does he? Why?
Yeah, he loves it.
Why do people live in Minnesota? Do you live in Minnesota?
Yeah, with the highest quality of life in the nation.
Are you Denmark? What are you talking about? The highest quality of life? You are in no way.
First in literacy rate, first in life expectancy, first in like healthcare, and not just because of the Mayo Clinic. Which, by the way, we got the Mayo Clinic. I'm just saying.
See, now I'm questioning all the stats that you're throwing out at me because that can't be possible. We're gonna have to do a whole new sideshow on this thing. But look,
water quality, air quality. Come on, man.
But as far as Wentz goes, I mean, he's getting the ball out quicker. His yards per attempt are down because of that too. But I think from a mental perspective, they've condensed the offense with Deshaun out. And in week one, you saw Wentz change both shot plays at the line to Deshaun and take those shot plays and they went for touchdowns. He's been doing that throughout the season. It's just he hasn't had the guy to do Deshaun things because Deshaun doesn't run like clear out routes. He just runs touchdown routes. And they've really condensed the offense for Wentz. And I think he's executing it perfectly fine. I mean, you look at what the overall performance of the offense, and again, the running game didn't get going until a couple of weeks ago. 7th in points per game, 6th in DVOA. They're 6th in the red zone. They're 2nd on third down percentage. He's not turning the ball over at all. They're 6th in touchdown drive frequency. It's just been a solid, offense. And I think like what would describe this offense best, and as far as like what I would like to see from Wentz with Deshaun out, there was an 8-play 76-yard drive against the Packers where it was a lot of quick game RPO stuff. There was play action from runner center, and Wentz just made the throws that he was supposed to make. And I think he's been doing that for the majority of the season with a little bit of accuracy issues and some communication issues with the wide receiver depth that they had, and bad luck with drops. So there's a lot of context there. I do think he's playing at a high level. I wouldn't be as high on him as PFF. I mean, the fact that they have him rated over Russell Wilson is a little odd to me because I think Russell Wilson is playing the best quarterback play in the league right now. So I disagree with him a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Sure. So the Vikings have been having a number of defenders have either returns to former career years. I mean, you've got Danielle Hunter having a career, Eric Kendricks having a career year. You've got, Harrison Smith is playing about as well as he always has. Anthony Harris is having the best year of his career thus far, 5 games in. Everson Griffin is playing well. Who worries you in terms of, you see the Eagles offense out there. You've got Carson Wentz. You've got, I guess, Jordan Howard, not Miles Sanders. You've got whoever at receiver, whatever. And then you've got, the tight end, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. What kind of matchup there concerns you the most? I guess besides the wide receivers, we just talked about that. And which defender do you think, based off of what you've seen of the Vikings, could most likely kind of ruin Carson Wentz's plans?
Yeah, I think it's going to have to, even though he didn't really play well against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, Harrison Smith just kind of flying around.
Famously did not.
Yeah, famously. I think he gets a lot of crap for that too, man. That double move from Ertz was unfair. He was going to the sideline. It was, under 2-minute situation. He's running to the sticks, and Harrison got a little aggressive with it. It's really no big deal. But Harrison Smith, I mean, you watched him against the Giants, and he almost cut off a route from Daniel Jones going deep and going, from hash to the sideline there, and almost picked one off. I think he's a guy. If there's anyone right now, and I said Wentz has been really strong in the pre-snap to post-snap phase, not getting confused by things. Greg Williams tried throwing some things at him, couldn't really get to him. But I think that if there is somebody that can show him something, do another, and get there and make a play and make a big impact play, because that's what's going to have to, you're going to have to do that to slow down the Eagles offense. You're going to have to turn the ball over. I think Harrison Smith is going to be the guy that would have to make that happen for the Vikings, and is probably the most liable too, along with the matchup that we detailed before with Jason Peters and Everson Griffin.
All right. And then final question. This comes from one of our listeners. I believe you saw the question because you were tagged in it.
Oh, boy.
Just, what's the best way to prepare horse crap?
Yeah. So, brother, I don't always like being lumped in with the entirety of the antics of the Philadelphia fan base. I live in Florida, which is bad enough. Like,
gross.
So what am I really going to say about? Yeah, what am I going to say about Philadelphia people? I am literally Florida man. So we don't do the horse crap thing down here. There's a lot of meth and babies with guns and all that stuff. So that's what I got going on down here. So good for you for having
would you
Florida man
punch a horse and would you rather punch a horse in the face and then take whatever consequences come from that, or eat some horse crap?
Oh, I thought this was like a win-win thing. That's okay. That's not where it went. Have you seen the video, some of the riot videos over there in like the soccer riots, and the dude just punches a horse in the face? Have you seen this? I tweeted that video out once, and the country of Portugal's Twitter retweeted it.
What?
Yeah.
The country of Portugal?
The country of Portugal's Twitter retweeted it. I don't know if it was like a soccer thing, like a rivalry with the team that it was going on with, but yeah, there was a riot. This guy punches a horse in the face and of course gets taken down by the cops or whatever, but like he jacked that horse hard. So I tweeted that out because I was in Mobile, actually. That was the Senior Bowl a couple years ago. And all of a sudden I see this blue check had retweeted it, and it was the country of Portugal. Fun story.
I mean, they might just hate horses there. I don't know.
I got to find out now. Yeah.
Did he drop the horse? Is the horse like done for?
No, the horse ate it, man. It was like pretty much unfazed. I think he like neighed a little bit or whatever, but like, nah, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Could LeGarrette Blount, who I believe was on the Eagles, right?
Ran over Sendejo.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Could Sendejo take out a horse? Took out a teammate.
Sendejo would knock himself out trying to go after a horse. Like he would hit it.
Yeah, that's obvious. But I mean, would he, and also like a murder suicide, would he also take out the horse?
Yeah. I mean, the difference between Avonte Maddox, who has like the tiniest arms on the planet, and it's just a tiny little dude, and a horse is a big difference. So seeing as Blunt ran over Sendejo, I'm gonna have to go with the horse. Might be controversial.
And then Blunt versus a horse.
Oh.
As a former Bronco himself.
Blunt would take the horse down, but then would only get like a yard.
That's fair. Yeah. All right. we need a score prediction.
Oh.
Not Blunt versus a horse, but Eagles versus the Vikings. Obviously, score predictions are dumb. We don't hold people accountable to them. But it's fun. So Vikings favored by 3 for some reason.
I mean, that's home field advantage, right? You just give 3 points for home field.
They're neutral field. Yeah.
What's the over?
What's your take? I don't remember. I'm not gonna have Vegas do the score prediction for you. You have to look it up if you want Vegas to define the number.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, so I think Kirk Cousins is average. I think the Eagles defense is average. What is average? 20 points for the Vikings? Let's go with 20 points. So where no one looks too great, no one looks too bad. I think I like that logic. And then for the Eagles offense, I mean, this Eagles offense is still pretty good as for as much people are panicking about them. I mean, I listed the stats off. They're putting points up. They got Carson Wentz, who's at least you can admit slightly better than Kirk Cousins. Let's see here. Oh, you're not going to say anything
when
tonight.
He's healthy, maybe.
He's healthy right now. So,
some North Dakota tough he is.
Yeah, I mean, I do think I agree with Vegas. It's going to be a close game. North Dakota tough. It's going to be 23-20. We'll go 23-20. Lock it in. I put a lot of thought into that. 23-20.
Eagles covered by 6. Is that the?
Yeah. Why not?
All right.
Why not? What do you say? 21 to we'll do it 20 to 19.
They're starting the 6th best quarterback on the roster. That's why. Let Lane Johnson sling it a bit, man.
We'll go 20-19 with a Scott Norwood miss wide right. Does that make you happy?
I'm happy enough. All right, let people know where they can find you.
At Michael Kist NFL. That's Kist, like Sunkist. Also, put it in Bleeding Green Nation.
Christ, you say that every time.
No, I don't. I don't. That would be a very annoying. That would be a very annoying brand. But I do like to spell it. But okay. Anyway, what was I saying? Where can you find me and follow me on
Michael
Twitter?
Kist NFL, because all the cool people have at blank NFL in their Twitter handles.
I mean, you have to. Otherwise, what are you covering?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then, I know people follow you at Bleeding Green Nation. What was the next thing you were going to say?
This guy has NFL in his name, and he doesn't. Anyway, that's Bills fans. That's Bills fans right there, not Vikings fans. Calm down, guys. Also, Bleeding Green Nation into any podcast app that you have, and you can listen to our show there. We have a ton of shows. We do a QB SCO show with my buddy Mark Schofield. We have a ton of different insights. Benjamin Solak's on there. It's a very good time. It's not just for Eagles fans all the time. There is some homerism. We apologize. And then you can follow that account at BGN_radio as well.
All right, dope. Thanks for coming on, man. This has been great.
Hate you, but I did this anyway because I'm contractually obligated. At least that's what you sent me. I don't know how that works.
No, that's don't look that up.
Yeah, we work for 2 different companies, and you sent me anyway. I didn't have time to contact Schofield and have him look it over.
All right, guys, follow him on Twitter. He's great, except when he's not. This has been Michael Kist. Thanks so much.
No problem, bud.
It is nice for you to be as nice as you can to Michael Kist.
We're good friends.
I don't think he comes off as your enemy at all. I mean, by the end of it, you did say that when sometimes he's a fantastic follow. Other times he's not, but. You give him the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's what I appreciate about you.
That's what friends like he and I are do.
It's a friendly rivalry in that he wants to push you off of a bridge. It's fine. Let's go to the mailbag and start off with North Dakotan Matt Myrick, who asks, "Who does Carson Wentz think he is anyway? How dare he?"
Right? I ask him that every day.
And yet he still refuses to respond to you like a coward.
Debate me.
Every day you wake up and spray the silver spray paint in your mouth screaming, "Witness me," and he never gets it. Damian Barrett says, on the last pod, Arif mentioned that the Cousins/the offense, or rather that Cousins/the offense, not the Cousins, that would be weird, performs well against poor defenses. How worried should we be that Philly has gone from the 22nd to 6th on Football Outsiders in the space of a week?
Not much. We covered this a little bit in the interview, but the Jets just played so poorly. It skews everything. They're much closer, I think, and maybe Kist is closer to So the 6 than the 22, but I think they're closer to the 22 than the 6. Just kind of given their performances overall. The fact that that Luke Falk was holding the ball for so long on those sacks, the fact that, the receivers, of which there were not many, couldn't find ways to get open against the secondary. I just feel like that's a product unique to the Jets, and they played so poorly that it increased the averages for all of those teams. So we talked about that a little bit. They will get some players back, so that's going to help, but I honestly don't think that you could categorize them as the type of good defense that he struggles against or the type of bad defense that he feasts on. So it's going to tell us a lot. Like Michael Kist said, it's a litmus test game, but both for the Eagles and for Kirk Cousins.
Also asked is the question, given Arif's reverse jinx against his nemesis QBs this year, see Chicago, how long before we see Josh McCown on Sunday, and how is he going to beat us?
I think probably the second quarter, and I think it's a rushing touchdown.
Is it going to be as obvious as the quarterback sneaks tonight by Brady at the end of the game?
No, it's definitely going to be the sneaky athleticism that he had on display in Tampa Bay.
Because when I think sneaky athleticism, I think Josh McCown.
Hey, he can ball. Have you? There are interviews where people ask, who's the best basketball player on the team, and players are like, "You're never going to believe this." It's Josh McCown, and there's a video with at Buccaneers.com of him hooping and crushing people.
That is absurd.
He's good, man. And so, we're all worried about, Carson Wentz's athleticism, the Vikings versus running quarterbacks. Carson Wentz, he's going to, rush in a touchdown, get 40 rushing yards. McCown, man. Hey, he was a slot receiver for the Lions. Okay? Watch out.
It's weird because whenever I think of Josh McCown, for whatever reason, I just envision JD from Scrubs playing in the quarterback position or something. For whatever reason, I've just had that thought in my head. So the idea,
that's fair.
I mean, not to make some white quarterback thing, but I just have that envision in my head. I'm just trying to envision JD being decent at basketball, and that's not happening.
So McCown only ever used his athleticism at the bookends of his career.
Because why use it, to get a paycheck?
Right, yeah. So at the beginning, when the Lions actually had him at receiver, wild. And then near the end, when he was just it doesn't really matter what I do. It's 13th team, right? Just starts running.
Just to be clear, McCown is the one who retired earlier this year, and then the Eagles got him out of the rocking chair, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, because Studfeld was injured.
That's right. That's what that was. Okay. Let's go with Mick's question, and I'm trying to figure out if he meant the Giants or the Jets. So against the Jets, 4 drives stalled out, but were converted to points with field goals. If given similar situations, score, time of the game, etc., against Philly, should the Vikings attempt to go for it at least once, knowing Wentz has the ability to make comebacks?
Yeah, well, I think that they should go for it at least once, not because, Wentz has this capability to make comebacks, but because it's analytically the sound decision. I think, quote unquote, taking the points is just finding ways to lose potential points. So, yeah, go for it unless it's 4th and 12 every single time, in which case, avoid it. But yeah, I think that they should go for it unless, the score dictates otherwise. You're up by 11, right? And you go up 3 to make it a 2-score game instead of a 2-score game. I don't know. If the score math says, a field goal is about as good as a touchdown, then kick the field goal. But otherwise, just go for it more often.
JHS asks, should Irv Smith be lining up in line more frequently and spell Rudolph more? The tight end screens seem to be designed around the inline blocker running behind the tackle, which is why Rudolph gets those receptions. Can Irv handle these same blocking responsibilities?
Yes, I think so. So I think that the evidence suggests that Irv Smith should be taking over for Rudolph in terms of snaps. I would say, generally speaking, that's something I'd be cautious about because the stuff that he's being asked to do is stuff that he already did at Alabama. The question is whether or not he can kind of build on that, do more. And I was always kind of concerned that he'd be kind of a late developer. Well, the first part of that, we don't know, whether or not it's true or false, but I think the fact that he's not playing more snaps is maybe good evidence that the Vikings don't seem doing that. The fact that he doesn't need that much development as a blocker is a pleasant surprise to me, to the Vikings, to everybody, but, him, I guess. I wouldn't say generally speaking he should get significantly more snaps, although I would like to see more snaps over the course of the season. But I think in the specific situation that you outlined, inline tight end to grab those kind of tight end screens, yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something that he'd be much better at, that he can use a lot more. He has a lot of experience after the catch navigating open field blocks and stuff like that. So it's not even a question of kind of whether or not his skill set is suited for it. It's not just because he's fast, but he's got kind of a whole skill set that's built for it. And then, of course, can he kind of run block in line? And the answer so far has been yes. So I think unqualified, yes, he should get more snaps in that situation over Rudolph. And I think qualified, yes, he should get more snaps in general over the course of the season.
Next question is going to be from the unlicensed fantasy football opinion giver.
That's a great name, too.
That really is. If the Eagles employ 11 personnel with Jordan Howard as the back, would you risk putting Ron Kearse on the field if Deshaun Jackson is in the slot?
Well, I'm pretty confident Jackson's not going to play, but let's say he does. No, I would not put Ron Kearse on the field. 11 personnel, I would very much just be okay going regular nickel and making sure that whoever's in the slot has the capability to cover him, which I think that's more Mike Hughes than it is Mackenzie Alexander. Obviously, the cornerback with the speed best suited to Deshaun Jackson is Trey Waynes, but you don't want him in the slot. So in that specific case, I would definitely not put Ron Kearse on the field. I would put Mike Hughes out there with Rhodes and Wentz on the outside. If it's not Deshaun Jackson, say if it's Mac Hollins or whoever is the third receiver, that I think would be kind of a down and distance thing. If it's third and short, I put Ron Kearse out there. If it's second and long, I'm putting probably like Mackenzie Alexander out there or something.
Next question is from Joe Schneider. I believe he is the purveyor of the Hub Pub in downtown Forks, which has fantastic food, by the way. If Reif leaves next year, do they move O'Neal to left tackle? I think he has the skill set to play left tackle, or do they leave him at right tackle thinking that if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
I mean, I personally would leave him at right tackle. I see the Vikings as the kind of team that would move him to left tackle. For me, I think, So the new evidence from PFF suggests that their previous conclusion that left tackle and right tackle are of equal importance is not quite true, and I think it's because there's a wider variance at left tackle than there is at right tackle. So in theory, moving him to left tackle is better. Personally, I think that in the context of kind of moving one guy to one side or the other, I would probably keep him where he's been successful because I think the net impact is that he reduces the same amount of pressures. And the PFF evidence does not suggest that pressure from the left or pressure from the right is necessarily worse or better. So I would keep him on the right because I think he still has the capability to reduce pressure. In the NFC North, there's always the possibility that you've got some of these rushers that like to move around a lot, rushing from the right just as equally from the left. So I'd keep him on the right, but I do see the Vikings in that scenario moving him to the left.
Andrew asks, where's Hercules? Maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't hear his name at all last week. Has he been dropped down a notch?
He's been inactive, actually, for the past 2 weeks. So the Vikings have basically, and a healthy scratch, not like injury, he's not been on the injury report. So the Vikings have basically promoted Jalen Holmes above him. I assume because, he let some gaps get open in the run game, and they kind of want to see what Holmes can do. Either way, Holmes didn't get that many snaps. The nickel pass rush is basically 4 defensive ends. You've got Afadi Odenigbo and Stephen Weddle on the inside with, Everson Griffin, Daniel Hunter on the outside. And then on base downs, it's Linval Joseph and Shamar Stephan. And so there's not a ton of wiggle room between base downs and nickel downs where you'd end up putting Jalen Holmes on the field. But he basically, when Linval Joseph gets a rest and Julio Johnson is on, Shamar Stephan gets a rest, then it's when Jalen Holmes gets on. So it's not that many snaps either way. Mata Afa was playing in the nickel role. Holmes doesn't seem to be right now. But yeah, he's just been a healthy scratch. Maybe they just like what they've seen in practice more from Holmes.
Brad Davis says, let's say Hughes plays as well as we expect him to be playing for the rest of the year. Holden Hill comes back and plays up to our expectations. How do you guys feel about letting Waynes walk and trading Xavier for a first and then keeping Mac? You now have the cap space and an extra first. Do you go use your 2 firsts either to trade up and get a quarterback, take next year's first 2, and get Tua if you think that he's the guy? Or do you get 2 O-line and maybe an O-line and a wide receiver or another first-round cornerback?
So loading up for the draft to get a quarterback. So normally I would say no. Like normally I would say, Xavier, especially if you can trade him for a first, or even if you can trade him for a first, I wouldn't do it just because you end up with no cornerback depth. You're left with like Chris Boyd, Mark Fields, and the Vikings are very familiar with what happens when a cornerback gets injured. One of these cornerbacks that we're talking about, Mackenzie Alexander, has gotten injured. And then we also have a cornerback availability problem with Holden Hill. We don't know if he's going to get caught again or something like that. He's kind of a liability. And so you need cornerback depth, and you kind of rob yourself of that. And if you end up using a first on a cornerback, you save money, but you haven't really, moved in the right direction. You've traded Xavier Rhodes for a younger corner, so that gives you more money, but it doesn't give you the kind of draft capital you need to move up or anything like that. That said, quarterback is such an important position that if we're at a point where we're saying Cousins isn't the answer, and obviously I feel like we'd have to make this trade before we can fully answer this question because of the trade deadline. But let's say we make the trade, and you trade Xavier for first, which I think is pretty good value given how he's played. And you let Trey Waynes walk, and you get a compensatory third, a year out or whatever, probably a compensatory fourth. Then you keep Mac. Then you've got a pretty thin cornerback group that you're going to want to invest in later in the draft. But quarterback is so important that I would package the 2 firsts to move up if possible. And I don't know if it's possible to get Tua, but, there's the possibility that a number of these quarterbacks could fall. I don't know if Joe Burrows is a first-round guy. Last I saw him, he's a 4th-round guy, but I hear he's probably going to rise up the boards. Fromm is potentially a first-round guy. Herbert is a first-round guy. He could fall. I did a mock draft where Herbert fell all the way to the Vikings at 19. And so, yeah, I would then get, a quarterback and play him behind Cousins in 2021 or 2020. So, yeah, I think that that's smart, but only in the case where it's a quarterback. Other than that, I wouldn't do it because the cornerback depth thing, I think, is a pretty significant issue.
Raul has another fantastic question this week. Contract incentives for PFF grades rather than traditional statistics. Is there a downside? And who would be more against it, the player or the team?
That's really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if players were more against it than teams. I think it is more common for teams to undervalue players relative to their PFF grade than the other way around, where a player's PFF grade is high and the team doesn't value it, which is not to say it doesn't happen. It certainly does. But I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, the only, it's all subjective, but the only quote unquote subjective contract incentive is like All Pro and Pro Bowl, which is kind of similar to PFF grade, but like really is just closer to, the closest we can get to a consensus recognition. Obviously, Associated Press determines All Pro, so they do have as a media organization kind of unique control over that. The problem, I think, is that PFF grades are done weekly, and being able to fight over that for specific contract incentives. I mean, players actually already do fight with PFF behind the scenes. They like send them messages and stuff like that. Not just publicly, although we do see that on occasion. But they do fight with PFF. And the idea that PFF is now in direct control of how much money they have, I think that would just screw up the whole thing in a pretty bad way. Whereas players don't fight with like Associated Press reporters on their votes for the All-Pro ballot. So I don't like it just because I think that, A, you despite having a degree of subjectivity for all of the incentives, right? Because tackles, they're recorded by stat keepers that, have to make a determination on who made the tackle and stuff like that. That's subjective. Despite that, this is too much, I think, subjectivity for that kind. Now, if it was like an advanced statistic that you found through charting, I might be more open to it instead of a grade, but I'm still not super on board.
Next question is from John Belk, who asks, "It doesn't seem like Kirk is the long-term answer, but it also seems unlikely the Vikings ever bottom out. Given that, do you A, use a ton of resources to trade up for a quarterback, B, use a ton of resources on the offensive line and hope a really good offensive line can elevate a mediocre quarterback, a la Andy Dalton's one really good year, C, keep roughly the same strategy the Vikings have been using and hope a late first round or day 2 quarterback ends up being good enough, or D, something else?"
I think A. So in line with kind of that last question about trading Xavier Rhodes, quarterbacks are just really important. I don't know how else to put it. Using so many resources and hoping you get like a 2015 Andy Dalton, that just seems unlikely. And Kirk kind of already had that in 2015, actually. And I don't know if you can, which is not to say, this is like a lightning strikes twice fallacy, but I just don't know if you can kind of replicate that environment for him because, as much as people rag on Hugh Jackson now, and I think fairly so, Jackson was a brilliant play designer for that year and play caller for Andy Dalton. McVay did and Shanahan and the whole kind of the Gruden group in Washington did a really excellent job kind of handling first Robert Griffin and then Kirk Cousins in terms of designing that offense. And so a lot of that is kind of contextual on and stuff that you can't predict beforehand. So I wouldn't use a ton of resources on a surrounding group unless it was clear that you could not use those resources for a quarterback. The C strategy, keep it roughly the same and then hope a late round or a late day 1 quarterback or early day 2 quarterback ends up being good enough. I don't hate it. Like I said, there seems to be a lot of quarterbacks in this draft. So, that could be a strategy. I mean, like you could, end up with your own Drew Lock or something like that, So I don't hate that one either. D, something else. I don't know what that something else is, but investing resources into a supporting cast isn't inherently bad. It's just making sure that when you have the capability to make a run at a quarterback that you do.
Next question is from Kenneth Allen, who asks, "Elite quarterbacks consistently know which defenders to attack and avoid on the field. Think Rodgers versus rookies. Does Cousins have that element to his game, and will we see it against Sidney Jones this week?"
So first, I think Sidney Jones will be an upgrade. It's if like Craig James is on the field. But second, no, I think so. Cousins is very kind of methodical, paint by the numbers quarterback. And so to him, it's a lot less about matchups, and he has to consistently fight his instincts in order to target matchups. He's talked about this, where he has to, quote unquote, trust his guys and throw it up there. He reads the defense, sees what the defense puts there. He either goes through a progression, a 1-2-3 progression, or he goes into a man zone read and throws what's there. And so it's not about, hey, Nate Metters is on the field. I've got this great matchup with Geronimo Allison. I'm going to get a touchdown here. And it's a lot more, they're in cover 2, I'm throwing the post. So like that's really what it is. So not really, but I mean, your offensive play callers can do it anyway, right? Like if you see that, the guy that you're targeting, say Craig James is on the right side of the field, you can call a 3-by-1 formation with Stephon Diggs directly on Craig James. He toasted him in camp a lot, so it's something he's familiar with. And you can call a route and just tell Cousins in the microphone to pay attention to the alert, which in this case is Stephon Diggs against Craig James. So the play caller can do it, but I don't think Cousins intuitively does it.
Also, he asks, how does Mr. Homeowner feel after his first week amongst the middle class?
First week as an adult amongst the middle class, I've got a solid privileged middle class background that I'm coming from. I wouldn't have this house otherwise.
I was gonna say, are we gonna ask you to check your white privilege yet, or?
Right. It's stressful, man. Which is not to say I wouldn't want this house. I clearly do. But yeah, we're like talking about like furniture and room colors and mortgage payments, and it's I should have taken care of this at 26, and I'm 30. So cool.
Yeah, good on you. I will. I was trying to explain to somebody online why you preferred UND, or why you preferred Grand Forks as opposed to Fargo, and I think I came up with the conclusion that it was because UND had given your family a bunch of money. I mean, your dad was working there, but like they were giving you.
I mean, he earned it, but
he earned it, but
received it.
Yeah, the money came from the university, came from the city, came from the taxpayers of the town. So I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility as to why you prefer Grand Forks to.
I guess in a weird way, Grand Forks gave me a home, but not in the way that you would normally say that.
No, much more in the tangible sense of the word, I suppose. Kyle Slavey asks, is Sendejo a secret operative working to destabilize the Eagles from within?
If he was, he wouldn't have taken out Avonte Maddox. He would have taken out Malcolm Jenkins.
Ooh, good answer. Cox and Graham are monsters, and I've heard flashes of Bennett. Do we have enough talent to reasonably expect the O-line to give the offense the time and the gaps to operate?
Enough. I'm not going to say like an overwhelming amount. So Graham very often lines up on the right side. So you've got Brian O'Neill and Graham going against each other. That's going to be very interesting, I think. Cox, obviously, he's going to line up wherever kind of the strength of the formation takes him. So sometimes he'll be on F-line, sometimes he'll be on Klein. Given the injuries they've had at nose tackle, we might actually see double teams on him. I don't think that's going to be very likely because he's going to be on like the outside shoulder of the guard instead of the inside, so it's difficult to get those double teams, but it's something I'm sure they'll be thinking about. Two pass rushers, which is because I don't think, Derek Barnett is that threatening, and Josh Sweat is somebody who I liked a lot in the draft. I was kind of upset the Eagles got him because I think he was kind of this perfect candidate for the Vikings, productive in his limited time on the field. Super athletic, was injured, and so his stock dropped. But so far, he hasn't proven that he can meet his flashes. So Riley Reiff, an average offensive tackle, I think can handle that. So is Cousins going to be under pressure only 20% of the time? No, but I do think he'll be under pressure less than 45% of the time, and that's enough. Like, that pressure rate is not great. 40% or something like that is not great, but it's enough for the offense to operate. And it's been enough historically for the offense to get some things done. So given that weak secondary, it'll be easier for Cousins to mitigate that pressure by getting rid of the ball faster because we're going to be pretty sure that the receivers are going to be open. So I think that there's a lot of possibilities there.
All right, next question is from Chris, who asks, if the Vikings drafted an NDSU player, how much expected value above the draft slot would the player have to counteract Arif's inherent bias and call it an acceptable pick?
Okay, so here's the thing about this question. It has a premise in here that I cannot abide, which is that there is some draft value you can get out of an NDSU player. Come on, what is this?
I mean, I saw it coming, but it was still good.
A draftable NDSU player. Yeah. No, I mean, so here's a good litmus test. If Billy Turner had signed with the Vikings, he's got a little bit of history with the Kubiak, Dennison, whatever group, I think. And he's done zone running. He did it with NDSU. If he had signed with the Vikings instead of the Packers and he was competing basically with Pat Elflein, I probably would have said it was a good idea, right? NDSU guy, mid-round pick, I think, or at least maybe I valued him as a mid-round pick. Not great in Miami, but, reasonable-ish with, coaching upside. I would have said it was fine. And if he started above Elfline, probably would have been fair for most of the year to him. But, I'd rather not. I'd rather he not, be on the roster. I'd rather not have to deal with random John Crockett, NDSU running back or whatever. Yeah, you just don't do it. It's fine. It's easy. There's not many players where there's going to be a sole player with that amount of value that happens to come from NDSU.
Next question is from Jack Stanzi, who asks, my wife made good old-fashioned chocolate chip cookie bars. Then
Delicious.
She immediately followed that one up with these bars that were part of the chocolate, or where part of the chocolate is melted and spread on top. Which one am I supposed to tell her to stick with? I know the answer to this.
Whatever she likes most.
Also, it's a good one, but what you do is you have one of each, and then you see which one you come back for in 45 minutes to an hour. Because presumably this is like a dessert thing, and people will be able to nibble and be like, yeah, I kind of want to go back for that. That's how you tell. Be like, I like the chocolate chip one, but what I really liked was the melted one. So you have to do the who's coming back for who's coming back for it test.
Yeah. So regrettably, you'll have to ask her to bake some more.
God, that is just the worst. Yeah,
you can perform this experiment. Yeah.
Yeah, you hate to see it.
It's for science.
Yeah, that'll be your excuse. Don from Ohio asks, can Arif at least give me some competition this week in the Norse Code Fantasy Football League?
I don't think so, because I didn't change my lineup, and I think I started Evan Ingram. So, congrats, Don.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same league I had Tom Brady in which case, what a victorious comeback for his fantasy points.
It's not, because I have him in that league.
Okay.
What happens more on Sunday? Cousins runs out of a clean pocket, or he misses open receivers?
What happens more often? Oh, geez. The open receivers, I think.
And how much does James lose by this week in the Fantasy Football League? Over-under is at 75. Go to hell, Don.
Who's your kicker?
My kicker at the moment is the Dallas kicker, but I'm planning on picking up the Dolphins kicker again, because the best kicker to have in this league is for a team that doesn't make touchdowns. That doesn't score.
Yeah, fair enough.
And there was
I'll see if I can do that before you do.
You cannot do that, because I'm doing that right now. As I'm asking you, Arif, what do you have to plug this week?
Crap. Yeah, I wrote a piece on Everson Griffin. I'm going to have just a very small piece on the Eagles matchup. Some of the stuff that basically I'm just going to steal from Michael Kist, some of the stuff that he said. So, yeah, it's, this piece on how Everson Griffin has been doing a really excellent job, how his comeback is, this fantastic story, et cetera, and so forth.
And I was going to ask about you had put out a piece earlier in the week about the defense, right?
Yeah, probably. What did I write?
I'm trying to hold on. I'm just trying to distract you long enough so I can add this kicker.
Is it Jason's? Which Norse Code League are we in?
Well, now I have them in both, so don't worry about it. That is going to be it.
Fair enough.
That is going to be it. Sometimes it pays to, be the host of the show. Yeah. I take great pride in that. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. We'll be back next week, where we can talk all about, hopefully, the victory over the Eagles and where we move from there. So that'll be it. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that revenge is a dish best served funky as hell. And we will see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.